they are started on a high note when you look at how Ugandans were anticipating for the reopening of the economy, because we are very sure that this very year will be an economic recovery year. But in the long run, when you look at what has been happening in the last few months, commodity prices have been rising, fuel prices, aside to the fact that some of the regions in the country were selling fuel as high as 8,000 Ugandan shillings. So which can clearly show you the impact of how this has laid onto our economy. So in today's particular topic of discussion, we are going to be looking at the rising commodity prices in the country. And joining us on set is Honorable Henry Banyenzachi, is former Minister for Economic Monitoring in the ministry at the President's office also, but currently Director of the Operation Wealth Creation, still in the President's office. Many thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you, brother. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Let's kickstart off our discussion from the fact that now most of the commodity prices are rising. We've seen a bar of salt now goes for 5,000. Other areas have it at 5,500. A kilo of sugar, 4,500 to 5,000 Ugandan shillings. And in supermarkets, it's actually more worse in some of the areas. Also, let's look at cooking oil also rising. When you look at this particular situation, where do you think all this is coming from?
Basically, you can see that it is the consumer commodities which are whose prices is rising, and one of the causes of such a kind of rise, inflation, such a kind, is basically when government unleashes money, spends more money, to the public. They tend to be much more money chasing few commodities. And that one causes inflation, definitely. There is another cause which could be because of the cost of production. When the cost of production has gone, the prices go high. In fuel, you could see it was more or less hoarding and some other. It was hoarding and then the supply. Because of those trucks which are being detained at the border. But in this case where you see soap, salt, sugar,
cooking oil,
these are the commodities mainly used by our people, that sect of the people who are in the rural areas mainly. And you remember during COVID, there was that commonly known Nabanja money. Government,
the 100,000.
Yeah, government released billions of money to the public. And that money was just for spending, not backed up by production. So don't underestimate that kind of action which was done at that time. Because there was no production, and then money was unleashed, billions of money was released to the people just for spending. That's why you see normally during electioneering time, there is inflation. There is too much money going to the people, not backed up by production. So that is government spending, you know. So that kind of action, which actually the government should desist from doing, because you recall last time it never happened. When you release like money and you say, because what do the people need money for? If they want to eat, they need food. Give them beans, give them maize flour. You know, that one, if it is given money for purchase of maize, for purchase of beans, for purchase of cassava, for purchase of those commodities, it will spur production.
Okay.
Now this one was encouraging consumption.
Okay.
So that can be one of the causes, definitely, where we are seeing those. And sometimes that kind of inflation is caused when the Bank of Uganda prints money.
Okay.
And then it
plenty
increases.
of-
Then
okay.
it increases the supply of money. There is more money to spend. There is more money going into the economy,
Okay.
and that money which is coming in the economy is not coming from the production. So there will be much more money just chasing few goods.
Okay.
So that one could also be possible. I have not done the research, but mainly that one, of course, it is factual. You see, when it comes the cost of production, when the cost of production is very high,
Okay.
then the prices goes up, and that also causes inflation.
Can we also attach this to COVID in any way?
No, how?
Because for the last 2 years, this has actually been a very
No,
common answer
how?
in any issue that comes by.
If it comes to COVID, then you are going to bring that COVID handouts.
Okay.
That's what I was talking about, the Nabanja money.
The Nabanja money.
But COVID per se, as a pandemic, how would it cause? It may be if you say because there has been COVID, during the COVID areas,
There was no production.
there was
in
no
some areas.
production. And because there was no production, production was not going on, then that means there were few goods being produced and the demand was very high.
Yes.
That is also very possible because there was laying off, there was, SOPs, people were not, the industries were not producing to their capacity. That is also a possibility. So then we are talking about fuel, the cost of production when it goes high. Now the fuel has gone high, that is for a fact. Now because fuel has gone high, fuel inputs, this petroleum, diesel, petroleum products, they input into the production line. Now when they go high, definitely the cost of production has gone high, the prices increases.
Okay.
The hoarding, during that time we saw hoarding of fuel. So that hoarding also makes the cost of we saw the price of fuel going high, and then you see again prices being affected. So this kind of inflation that the cost of goods going high has more variants feeding in. So, but for example, for fuel, government can intervene. Supply of money, that's about monetary policy. Government can still intervene through Bank of Uganda, where I can mop that excess money. You remember, like some time back, after the elections, when the inflation had gone as high as 31st, and the late Tumusiime Mutebire, may he so rest in peace. He says, "I'm going to burn your fingers, use speculators."
Okay.
So those are some of the things that are causing these goods go high.
Okay.
And, yes.
Sorry to cut you short. Let's try to look at this situation here. Countries like Tanzania have rushed very fast to look for measures of how the fuel to check on the fast rising fuel prices. But as you look at us as a nation, what should be done, or what have we done, by the way, to ensure that the Russian war doesn't affect the fuel prices whatsoever? This is another bigger question. But even if it doesn't, which tentative measures can we lay on board to see that we survive the issue of rising fuel prices?
You see, Tanzania has more advantages than us.
Why is it so?
It is not a landlocked country. Fuel comes, docks to the port, and goes to the inland straight away. They even have refineries at the coast. For us, we don't have any refinery in this country. We don't have enough reserves. The cost of transportation of fuel from the border, from even Tanzania, for example, you cross the whole of Tanzania, you pass through Mutukura to take it to Arua, take it to Kampala, or it comes through Mombasa. That cost of transportation of fuel is very high, and lack of enough fuel reserves in case of the shortage is also very catastrophic to the prices of fuel. So Tanzania can mitigate, yes. It takes 4 days to get fuel from the Arab, those Gulf from the Gulf of the Arab to Dar es Salaam or one of their ports.
Okay.
But for us, it will take more days clearing, more taxes, more costs. So Tanzania can mitigate. It is not. It is not. It's on the border. It is on the sea. It's not a landlocked country.
Just like ours is.
It has a refinery. Because it has a refinery, it has more storage. But here for us. But what we need to do here as a country, we need to mitigate. We need to have bigger fuel reserves.
Okay.
Because, like, for example, for sure, when any shortage in fuel, we feel it within days. We need to fill our fuel reserves. We need serious measures. Our government and those who are responsible, the ministry, should make sure that that happens.
Okay.
But when you hear stories that our fuel reserves have been siphoned, then that is where the issues come now.
Let's also look
And
at
the investment into the fuel reserves has to be government. No private sector, no private person, no businessman will stockpile fuel just so that the country doesn't go into all of the companies like this, Shell, Total, whoever they are. When they stockpile in the fuel tanks, reserve tanks, they just reserve enough for supply of some few days.
Okay.
Because they will be holding too much capital. But as a country and as a government, we can afford holding, rather keeping some fuel worth billions of money to prepare for any catastrophe.
Okay. Honorable, let's also look at this here. We have case scenarios here where petrol is currently on around 4,920 shillings, depending on the fuel station. Yeah. Others have it at 5,000, still depending on the brand and fuel stations. And then diesel a little bit lower at the moment. Others have it at around 4,100, the others 4,200, other 3,900. This is when you look at the low brand fuel stations. Do you at any one point believe that these fuel prices can decrease at any time, or we should get used to the static fuel prices that we have currently?
Our command on the fuel prices is very limited. Okay. Because we do not, we are getting this fuel from the Gulf states. We don't produce fuel itself. It is determined by the international. It's international price.
Producing,
yeah, we don't determine that price. So the production, these oil producing countries who may even do a cartel, determine the price. So once they determine the price, that price that they will have determined will be, and plus the costs, plus the profit margin will determine the price here. What we can do, which is also very suicidal, is maybe if we say that we have removed taxes on fuel.
Are you calling it suicidal?
Yes. So where will you get the revenue from? Where will you get the revenue from providing the goods and services to run the nation? Where will you get the money to run hospitals, schools, build roads, build dams? We get that money through the
taxes,
through the tax revenues. So we can only say that it will be less if we subsidize. Do we have the money to subsidize fuel? No, we don't have. Okay. Instead, we are taxing that fuel. By the way, the tax on fuel, it is taxed at the source. Every time you fuel your car, that liter is taxed at that source. So we cannot afford to remove tax on fuel. We cannot afford to subsidize the fuel. So price can only go down if we subsidize or if we remove the tax. And that is suicidal. How will you run the country?
Okay. So now, when you look at some case scenarios as well, rising fuel prices, not only the fuel prices, but commodity prices, there is also a huge concern. Soap that is made from Uganda, because this is locally made. Look at the bar soap that we normally use. some Ugandans do believe that should not be as high as it is now, since it is made from our own country.
Soap is basically, this soap you are saying that is made in Uganda. It's basically bringing materials together.
Okay.
All those materials that make the soap are imported.
Oh.
They are imported, they come from outside Uganda. And because if they are coming from outside Uganda, that's a cost also. And the soap is actually from soaps. Most of, I think, soap, they have this petroleum kind of stuff by products. So definitely, if we are talking about that, those commodities which are imported at a higher price, that will determine the price of that soap. So everything that we are using in soap is imported. All those materials are imported. So if you are going to import those things, that's what we call the when you have inflation that is caused by international prices.
Okay.
It's exogenous. You have no control on it.
It is global.
Yes. Maybe if you are talking about oil, if we are talking about oil, and for example, we are talking about vegetable oil, from our oil we are getting from this karangara, palm oil, that you can say yes. But remember, if you are making, even in making this palm oil, you are using petroleum kind of byproducts to produce it in the factories, you know. So don't even underestimate the cost of energy.
Okay.
The cost of energy in this country, in this industry, is also very high. So there are a lot of things that are going to be putting in that determine the cost of that kind of inflation. And we are lucky if this inflation was also because of food prices. If the food prices have gone high, that would have been would be having a bigger effect on the economy.
The UN is actually warning that they may even become higher in the next few months because of the war.
Food. Food, we are a self-sufficient country. That's why you see here in Uganda, much as these countries beat us when they are not landlocked for us. Because we can be, if we so determined, Uganda can be 100% food sufficient itself. Okay. We can supply ourselves maize, we can supply ourselves beans, we can supply ourselves wheat flour, we can supply basically fruits, we can supply ourselves, we have our own meat, we don't import meat, we shouldn't be importing chicken, but because we have this kind of lifestyle of our young people who want to go to chicken something.
Chicken wings.
And
chicken,
these multinationals, they also impose themselves and say that our chicken is not to the quality. We are self-sufficient in chicken.
Okay.
And if we are to be self-sufficient in chicken, we could even be having, if we were adding value on our like, for example, maize, and we have mukene to mix with maize bland and feed our pigs, and feed our chicken. We wouldn't be even buying any animal feeds from outside.
True.
But because we have not invested sufficiently into agro processing and production of animal feeds. We are buying feeds again. We import our maize to Kenya, and then we are buying maize animal feeds from Kenya. It doesn't make sense.
Honorable, since you've actually been a former Minister of Economic Monitoring, let's from the President's office, let's try to look at this in this way. Does Uganda as a country have policies that are normally set to protect the consumers in such case scenarios? Now, for example, we've been through the same situation back in 2007 when Kenya was in elections. That time even sugar was very expensive. We've experienced most of these inflation cases throughout the time. When you look at such a situation, again, coming back to haunt us, has the government laid some policies that can protect the consumers?
Our economy is a liberal economy.
Okay.
We don't control prices. Because prices is just it comes as a function of demand and supply. And the policy which we could be having is to increase production, have increased production. If we are having a policy that is conducive for increased production of sugar, then the prices will automatically go down. Will not be very high. If you have a policy like, say, to grow palm and produce palm oil, grow sunflower, produce sunflower oil, sim, and produce that vegetable oil, and that is the policy which you can say a policy that will stimulate production. So basically, as a government, our policies is to stimulate production, and the policies are to encourage agro-processing so that the consumer goods are produced in plenty. There's no scarcity of goods. But as far as controlling the price is concerned, no, that policy is not there, and because we're a liberal economy. So and that would be, if you come to control prices, then people will not produce. If they're not making a profit and you want to control the price and say, you put a price cap. If I'm not making a price, I will not produce a profit, I will not produce. If you put a price cap, say, on petrol or diesel, on these petroleum products, if I'm not going to make a profit, I will not import that petrol, diesel. And the moment I don't, there is no importation, then there will be going to be scarcity. And when there is scarcity, then the prices goes high. Then you'll be having hoarding. Then you will be having black market.
But Honorable, don't you think this can affect the consumer in an open economy?
When you do what?
When we leave these prices, for example, prices shooting and we don't even stabilize them back.
The best way to do this is stimulate production and stimulate the supply. When you stimulate the production, if you give a conducive environment now and you have like sugar being in Rugazi, Kachira, Madivani, Kajiro Sugar Works, and there is enough sugar which is being produced, enough for domestic market, the prices will definitely go down. And if you are having enough, even to have that, you have enough to produce for the domestic and export, that is the best thing to do. But if you want to put a price cap, then because you are not making profit, as I've said, you will not do the production because you're making a loss. So the best way is to make sure that you have policies which will encourage enough production so that there are more goods. Less money is chasing more goods. Prices will go down. But if you have less goods, fewer goods being chased by a lot of money, prices will go high because the supply is limited. So the best policy is to make sure that there is more production. If we had more soap factories, then the soap factory wouldn't be very high. If we had more, about 10 Mukwano industries, we would be having enough soap being produced. And then this will encourage competition, and competition will encourage the prices. There can even, what they call sometimes in this, price war. Okay. The price war is when everybody is trying to cut the other, and then you bring the cost down so that your goods are more or less purchased more. But so the best thing to do is to spur production.
Honorable.
For example, like oil prices.
When you look at
if we were to have our own refinery and we are having our own fuel from Hoima, we bring our oil from the ground, from Bunyoro, and we are producing our own oil, definitely the prices will go low.
Honorable, when you look at some of the countries that do try to control their prices, don't
Which
you
one?
think they're somehow successful?
Which country?
When you look at countries like Tanzania trying as much
What
as they can, first of all, they fast track some of, for example, the fuel prices in here. They try to look for measures. And Kenya was actually ranked to be one of those countries that have the cheapest
I have
diesel.
told you, Kenya, when you get the petrol in Kenya, it is transported by say 100, 300 kilometers to reach its pump. Here you are transporting it 1,000 plus 1,500 kilometers. That is a cost.
Okay.
you are going to carry this, that's a cost. Probably what we could have done is, if we want to mitigate to cut on the cost, to make that the cost of doing business, when the cost of doing business goes low, the price goes low. So to cut on the cost of doing business, the cost of oil, is to have an efficient and effective, say, railway transport system, so that our fuel is coming through wagons. Okay. When it is coming to wagons, for example, it comes from wagons from Mombasa, it goes to Kisumu or Mwanza, then we are using the lake transport. Then it comes at Uganda. Port Bell, okay. Then it will enter Uganda at a low cost. But the fuel that we are getting is more or less, most of the fuel is coming through trucks. Oh. It's more expensive to transport fuel in these truck tanks than transporting it using railway wagons. And you also maybe use our water bodies. But our cost of transportation is very high. That's what we would have done. But we do not, our railway system is inefficient. Our water transport, we have not invested enough. But thank God there is this fuel tanks that have been built at Kawuku, which are going to use lake transport from Mombasa through the railway. Then it goes on Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria, they use a ship. A ship takes it to, actually they called MV, is it MV Mutebi?
Mutebi, they just commissioned one a few weeks back.
Yeah, when you use that kind of system now, the cost of doing business and transporting fuel up to Uganda, the nearest points, when it goes low, then the price will be low. So we need to fast track those mechanisms of making sure that the cost of doing business goes down.
All right. And for the meantime, we are heading into a break. But when we do return, we're looking at economic recovery. How best can we recover from these very situations that we're actually facing as a country, shooting up of prices amidst all these changes that is actually happening across the country and across the world. Stick around with us. We'll return shortly.